We can choose to do things we know we ought to do, or we can choose to, as it said, put things in the back burner. Of course, that's a personal choice. We know it's all up to us. That's a decision we make. Of course, with every decision we make, every cause, there is an effect. Now, if we choose to not do things rather, that we ought to have done, or in that manner, we choose to do things that we know we ought not to do, either way, we know that there is going to be a consequence, as there is always a consequence, an end result to all our actions or lack thereof. Of course, as we make these decisions, as life has been said, life is a series of decisions, and where we end up, a lot of it has to do with chance, yes, and the randomness of life. Of course, also a large part of that is the decisions that we make. And as we make these choices in our lives, whether they be good or bad, which sometimes seems a bit blurry, but despite that, the choices we make, as we make them, if there are things that we know we ought to have done and we don't do them, and continue with our lives as normal, and just continue as if what we should have done didn't exist. We just pretend that it's something that we didn't have to care about. Well, oftentimes, as also been said, one way people put it is, it may come back and bite us in the butt. Now, the reason being is sometimes there are things that we need to do, yet we don't do them. And as we ignore these pressing issues, things just snowball, and eventually they, get out of hand. There are things that we ought to have done, but we do not do them. And by not doing them, we end up just getting hurt in the end. I think a lot of people, they find out later on in life that choices they should have made and didn't make, now in the present moment, if they try to make those decisions, it's just not possible. It's just not the same. It just wouldn't have the same effect as if they had made what they now know in hindsight is the right decision now, rather than trying to go back and fix things. Sometimes there's just things that you can't fix. There was a decision 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years ago that you should have made, but you didn't make it. Now you can't just hit the replay button and go back and try to make those decisions that you should have made. Which is, I suppose you can say, that's part of the reason why in science fiction there's always been this fantasy of having a time machine, such as the movies back in the 80s, I believe, Back to the Future, where you can go back and undo or redo things that you wish you ought to have done, or more pulp culture movies such as, I believe it's 17 Again. All these movies that feed on this wanting of so many people of wishing they could go back and redo things, do them better with the better information they have now, which is, of course, it's a fantasy. It's something that is not possible. It's in the realm of science fiction. You can't go back in time, which makes it all the more important that we make the best decisions that we can now, doing what we can now to make those best choices that leads to a more favorable outlook on our future selves. Now, this sounds a bit abstract, so it brings me to a person that I used to know. This was back when I was still in corporate America, back when I was an accountant. So I knew this fellow coworker of mine who came into the workforce after me. I was an accountant at this time, and he was coming in and working in a very similar position as me on about the same level. And he was, well, I'm not going to comment too much on his character because that's besides the point, but this person, well, he was a bit older. He was in his early mid-30s, a bit overweight. And he was working at the same level as me and a lot of my other fellow co-workers at this time. He was, again, 30s, while most of us, the rest of the people working at this certain level, were early 20s to mid-20s. While people that are older, they have gone up a little bit higher on the ladder, the corporate ladder. And he confided to me, after we have worked together for a little bit and built a little bit of rapport, that he spent his 20s partying, clubbing, basically having fun, and listening to the advice of the people around him that told him that he didn't need to take building his career seriously in his 20s, that you can put that off later in life, that now in your 20s you should have fun. Of course, I don't know much about his personal life besides what I can see on the exterior, so I'm not going to make too many assumptions on that, but based on career-wise, the fact of the matter is he was at a different life stage than the rest of us young people in our early mid-20s. Yet he was still working at the same position. Now, just knowing that, that's not even judgment. Those are just plain facts. That speaks volumes on the choices or lack thereof choices that he made when he was our age. And now, of course, since he's in his 30s, he can't do the things. Hate to use this term, but he's behind on at least this matter, this respect, on the career ladder as we were quite about 10 years younger than him. Yet we were working at the same position. Even if you try to make all the right decisions now, life can be unfair at times. It'd be too late to make all the right decisions, and everything will be okay, because the fact of the matter is he made some wrong decisions that affects him now, and it's going to affect his life as it projects forward. Which I use this very brief example to illustrate a point. That is, it's easier said than done. It's easier to say that don't put off to tomorrow what you can do today. Things that you can get done now, don't wait to tomorrow to get them done. Easier said than done, but I think they're words to live by.